Hello and welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Wednesday, May 10th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White and the returning Chris P. Is it CPT? Yeah, it's Chris P. Towers.
CPT, Crispy Towers, yeah.
Yeah, I was confused there for a second.
Paul,
Almost
right?
confused
You're Chris
myself.
Paul
I am
Towers?
Chris Paul, yes.
Somebody going to steal your identity now that I revealed that?
I don't think that's how stealing identities works, but maybe.
Yeah, not to be confused with Cliff Paul Towers. Today on the show we're going to recap Tuesday's action, what's going on with Alek Manoah, a few rookie hitters look like they're coming around, and much more. Before we get started, please like this video and subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. And if you're listening on the audio side, download, follow, and leave a 5-star rating. It really helps. Thank you very much. Chris, you are back. How was your little vacay?
It was nice. I went to the Shaky Knees Music Festival in Atlanta. I am just completely sore everywhere just from standing around. It wasn't even like hot or anything. It was just like being on my feet for 9 hours a day. I'm sure there are people here who do that every day for work who are furious at me for complaining about it. But yeah, that's it was a good time. It's I'm going to be out a lot over the next month. I'm just apologizing in advance. I got jury duty now. I got 2 weddings coming up. There's a lot going on in my life right now. I'm kind of overwhelmed. I'm going to come up for air in mid-June and my whole world's going to have changed somehow.
Oh, man. All right, well, let's get into the baseball action here from Tuesday.
I don't believe what I just saw.
And we'll start with you, Scott. What you got?
All right. I think this is probably the Olive Garden breadstick today. Louie Varland of the Twins, a highly available pitcher who had a great start against a good lineup. San Diego. Louie Varland allowed 1 earned run in 6 innings, struck out 6, walked 2, allowed 5 hits. Got the whole line there now. Had 14 swinging strikes on 95 pitches. And this is something we've seen consistently from him when he's, the previous stints he's had in the majors, beginning last year and then earlier this year, he made a start. 14 whiffs on 95 pitches, 5 on the fastball, 4 on the cutter, 2 on the slider, 3 on the changeup. So he has a diverse arsenal there of pitches that are pretty effective for him. And he's raised his stock a lot in the last couple years with his velocity climbing. I know his fastball today peaked at 98. He developed a cutter that pairs very well with his slider and has helped to improve this bat missing ability he's showing. Last year in the minors between Double and Triple A, Louie Varland had a 3.06 ERA, 1.26 WHIP, 10.4 strikeouts per 9 innings. But that WHIP was pretty high, 1.26. 8.3 hits per 9 is high, 1.1 home runs per 9. Again, this is against minor leaguers. So Louie Varland does have a hitability quality to him. I think it's the diversity of the arsenal that helps him to be effective at times, but more so than he just has this wipeout pitch. So I think the ceiling is limited here with Louie Varland, but when you're talking about pitchers you can pick up in a pitching starved environment, you're not going to find a more attractive pitcher who's as available as he is, I would say. And at this point, it's worth considering him in basically all formats.
Yeah, I saw the same things as you, Scott. The increase in velocity really stands out more than anything. He's averaging 95.6 miles per hour on his fastball this year. Last year, that was 93.8. So up nearly 2 miles per hour compared to last season, and a 15% swinging strike rate entering this start, and had a bunch of whiffs here against the Padres as well. Louie Varland is 29% rostered. He's going up against the Cubs this weekend as the second start of a 2-start week, and then it looks like he's at the Angels next week. And he should stick around for a while, Scott. I mean, given the injuries to Tyler Mahle and
Kenta Maeda.
He should stick around for quite a bit.
Mahle went on the 60-day IL, excuse me. So he's going to be gone for a long time. Maeda, it's not a short-term absence. He is only on the 15-day IL. At some point, you would imagine he would come back.
I think it's one of those things where, if he does come back and he still stinks, they're probably not going to stick with him. Like they've
Yeah, I
already
mean, he
done
has-
the IL stint.
And Maeda has experience in the bullpen from his time
Yeah.
with the Dodgers, so that is a possibility. Presuming Varland and Bailey Ober are both pitching well. If I had to choose between Varland and Ober, who's here to stay, I would choose Ober. But Varland's pretty interesting too.
I do think Varland is pretty interesting. There's a tweet from Eno Saris last week. Going by AAA numbers, Louie Varland was a, quote, borderline top 10 guy in AAA with a plus fastball, above average slider, average cutter, below average changeup. And that was, as Frank mentioned, he was not throwing as hard last season. He averaged 93.8 miles per hour with his fastball. In the majors, it was 94 at AAA. We talked about it already, but 95.6 miles per hour in this start, 95.2 overall through 3 starts. So, it does seem like there's room for him to have taken a leap. He's got a big extension on the pitch, which makes it play up. I think he's pretty interesting. I'm not going to say Louie Varland is a stud or anything, but this is what we've seen so far is intriguing, to be certain.
Scott, would you drop someone like Jack Flaherty for Louie Varland? Flaherty still 74% rostered, another atrocious start on Tuesday.
Yeah, I would drop. I think we're to the point with Jack Flaherty now where I would drop him for
You just drop
anyone
him.
interesting.
Yeah.
And Varland certainly meets that threshold.
All right. Well, we might actually be dropping the player you're about to talk about as well, Chris, which is who?
Brandon Pfaadt, who came to the majors with a decent amount of hype, although it was one of those situations where the hype in the fantasy community greatly outstripped the hype in the scouting and prospects focused community. Not to say that there wasn't any hype around him, but the fantasy community talked about him like he was, a top 10 prospect, and he never quite got that high on the lists. And so far, what we've seen through the first 2 starts is the home run issues in the minors were not necessarily just a result of pitching in bad home parks. He's given up 6 in his first 2 starts, including 2 today, 460 something shot by Jorge Soler. And then I think the second one was only like 433 feet. So, not quite as impressive there, but yeah, he's getting hit real hard right now. He's getting whiffs with his slider and his slider and curveball, but fastball getting hit hard, 97 mile per hour, where is his average exit? 95.5 mile per hour average exit velocity. No, 91 point. Geez, I'm sorry. Frank, can you please edit that for the audio? 91.7. So the Baseball Savant page, when a pitcher is established versus when they're early on in their career, look very different on the player breakdown side. And I was looking at Kevin Ginkel's pitch velocity when I thought I was looking at Brandon Pfaadt's exit velocity.
I have it all.
The point is he's
91.7 mile per hour average exit velocity allowed for Brandon Pfaadt in this start, 97.2 on the fastball. The fastball has been the primary culprit so far. It has not been a great start. I would prefer not to drop Brandon Pfaadt. That being said, yeah, I think there's enough upside here. The strikeout and walk numbers in AAA, especially, very, very impressive. That my preference would be not to drop him. However, you certainly can't start him right now. And if you have a player who you definitely can't start, you have a player who you can at least consider dropping.
Now you drop him for Louie Varland, I assume. You drop him for Bailey Ober, I presume.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, those guys are doing it at the major league level, and Brandon Pfaadt isn't. So I think that's a reasonable enough choice.
I do think, I don't know, fantasy baseball Twitter, and unfortunately Twitter is too often used to gauge public perception anyway, but fantasy baseball Twitter has become a place of very unnuanced takes, I guess. And I do think, like you were saying, Chris, it was a little too quick to anoint Pfaadt. it's also a little too quick to bury him. Like,
Yes.
oh, he's worthless. Like, in a dynasty league, Brandon Pfaadt still has a lot of value. But I think in a redraft league, I don't see a lot of reason to hold on to him. I mean, it's possible he could come back next time out with a start deserving of all the hype, and we're scrambling to pick him up again. I think that's pretty unlikely. Frankly, I think it's more likely he gets sent back down.
Sure.
That that
yeah.
happens. But I do think it, and we've talked about this a lot in recent weeks, the learning curve for players entering the majors for the first time is especially steep right now. And the presumption should be to approach every call up with great skepticism in fantasy. The presumption should be that they'll fail at first. And, it'll take them a while to figure it out. And that may just be what Pfaadt's going through here. He did have 13 swinging strikes on 88 pitches, which is a very good rate in this start where he gave up a lot of hard contact. He had 4 whiffs on 3 different pitches. So he has, something of an arsenal to work with there, but it does seem like he needs more development. Maybe he'll take some learning experiences from this stint and apply it again, presumably on a return trip to the minors. I would have no objections to dropping him because he's just unusable right now.
Yeah.
And there's obviously no track record to suggest that he will turn it around.
Right.
Could happen, but there's no track record.
I'm writing a piece, based around the worryometer idea. And I'm writing about Max Scherzer and Alek Manoah and Brandon Pfaadt, Jack Flaherty also. And Flaherty's the highest. He's a 10. I think you can drop him. Pfaadt's an 8. And Manoah and Scherzer are 6 and 5, which your mileage may vary. I would imagine a lot of the people listening are much more concerned about Scherzer and certainly Manoah than that. What it comes down to in those cases is there's a extremely lengthy track record with Max Scherzer, and there's a 1.5-year track record with Alek Manoah of them being really, really good. Pfaadt's never done it before. So obviously there, you have, less to go on. But one thing that we talked about before the show that I wouldn't be surprised with is if Brandon Pfaadt had kind of a Shane Bieber-esque arc where, I'm actually looking up Shane Bieber's rookie year game log, and he was actually very good his first 4 starts, and then things fell apart. He had a 2.22 ERA through his first 4 starts and then was really bad the rest of the way. But you remember he was someone who the issue was he gave up too many home runs, gave up too much hard contact, but the strikeouts and the walks were there or where you want them to be. The walks weren't there, notably. I could see something like that where the first go through the league is tough because the margin for error is kind of slim. Brandon Pfaadt doesn't have overwhelmingly dominant stuff, just like Shane Bieber. And so, that's one where I don't want to give up on the long-term potential, even if I do think the short-term is, obviously droppable or at least certainly not startable.
Brandon Pfaadt is currently 67% rostered. I mostly agree with you guys. I think 10 and 12 team leagues probably could be dropped. I would drop him for either of the Twins pitchers, Bailey Ober or Louie Varland. I think in deeper leagues, 15 teams or deeper, probably hold just because there's not much out there right now. And in Dynasty, this goes without saying, if anyone panics after 2 starts into a career, yes, I would look to pounce. But I'd imagine, most Dynasty managers are pretty savvy. Chris, you mentioned the name Alek Manoah in there, and continues to look broken, this time at the Phillies on Tuesday night. 4 2/3, 3 runs allowed, 4 walks to 1 strikeout. 3 swinging strikes total on 94 pitches. He allowed 8 hard hits in this game, although the average exit velocity against wasn't terrible. It was actually pretty good. His slider had absolutely nothing. And for some reason, he made that his most used pitch. I don't really get it. 0 whiffs on the slider in the start. It had a 7% CSW, called strikes plus whiffs, 7%. League average is 30%. 7%. That is awful. So I don't know why he used the slider so much. He has just 2 quality starts in 8 outings this year. He's up to 25 walks to 32 strikeouts. That is a 5.5 walks per 9. Last year, he was at 2.3 walks per 9. It's a lot like what we said about Dylan Cease yesterday, but even worse. It's just a culmination of everything bad happening at once. Hard contact, barrels, the BABIP, hits, home runs, walks, everything is up, and the swinging strike rate is way down. So
there is nothing to point to with Alek Manoah's production right now to be positive about. Like literally nothing. Everything looks bad. He's got a 4.83 ERA, which is bad enough. His expected ERA is 6.70. That is almost 2 full runs worse than a 4.83 ERA. He's been awful.
It's not the worst differentiation, by the way, between actual ERA and expected ERA. That would belong to Bryce Elder. But I will say things are getting worse here for Alek Manoah, because it started out, it was mostly just the walks that were an issue. That hasn't improved. And now the stuff itself is playing way down. You mentioned the overall swinging strike rate. Frank, in his last 2 starts, Alek Manoah has 3 swinging strikes in each of his last 2 starts.
Yikes.
Like, something is very wrong here.
Frank used the perfect choice of words. He's broken right now.
Something appears to be broken with him. Yeah. Now, with part of what makes predicting baseball performances so hard is that it can take a lot of times it can take just a small adjustment that we don't even really hear about to fix what is broken. And maybe next time out, Alek Manoah throws 7 shutout innings with 11 strikeouts. I mean, we know that's within his capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to sit here and say Alek Manoah is done. But until he has that kind of redemptive start, I'm done using him in fantasy if I can at all help it. Because as you mentioned, Chris, there was nothing redeeming here in the profile for him right now. It's only getting worse.
The thing that I would say to keep in mind is that this game is all about trying to identify talent levels. But talent levels fluctuate. Now, for good players, the talent level fluctuates very little. And for bad players, the talent level tends to fluctuate very little. For most players, however, there are pretty big ranges of outcomes. And obviously, some players are more or less consistent than others. And in Manoah's case right now, I think clearly the talent level is at an all-time low. It's just a question of, is this the new baseline or is this just an ebb? My assumption is it's an ebb. And so when we say there's nothing we can point to in the underlying numbers to suggest that things will be better, that is not to say, at least for me, that is not to say that I do not think things will be better. I think he will figure it out. I think that Alek Manoah will end up being at some point a top 25 pitcher again. But you can't treat him like that right now. He doesn't deserve that. You know, it's Luis Castillo went through this a couple of years ago. There was someone last year who had a similar, like a top 20 guy who just wasn't right for a stretch. These things happen. It's frustrating to go through. Don't drop Alek Manoah, certainly. And if you have him on your team, you're kind of stuck, because I think trading him right now would be a bad idea, because I do expect him to be much better than this moving forward, and you're not going to get anywhere near equal value for him.
Yeah, but unless you can find a Blue Jays fan in your league that's willing to pay, I don't know, 75 cents on the dollar, then probably not looking to do anything with Manoah.
What I was going to say is, how much on the dollar would you pay for him? I don't think I'd pay 75 cents on the dollar either, but would you pay 50 cents on the dollar? Would you pay 40 cents on the dollar? Like,
I mean, what does that look like?
There is a buying opportunity here if you have, if you don't mind planting him on your bench for a while.
So we spoke about 2 names yesterday, Scott, Mitch Keller and Justin Steele. Would you be willing to trade either of those pitchers? The way they're pitching right now, they're absolutely dealing. Would you trade either one for Alek Manoah?
Well, yesterday I would have said yes. After this start, look, I still rank Alek Manoah ahead of those 2 rest of season. So it's a justifiable move, but like I don't think you should have to do that to get Manoah. Is the thing. I think I would drive a harder bargain than that.
Okay. Looks like he's in line for 2 starts next week up against the Yankees and the Orioles. So I proceed with caution. I think you probably need to bench him, but it's normally if you can't start a pitcher on a 2-start week, you say, oh, you could probably bench that pitcher. But with Manoah, it is a little bit different. So I think we're just kind of holding out for now and waiting until we see some encouraging signs from him. We had another round of pitcher injuries here on Tuesday that I just wanted to quickly run through. Max Fried. We knew that he was kind of dealing with something, but the Braves were, I don't know, they weren't being forthcoming about whatever he was dealing with. And it turns out it's a strained left forearm, and he's placed on the IL. Looks like Jared Schuster is going to make the start Wednesday in Max Fried's absence. And obviously, anytime you hear strained left forearm, it sounds pretty bad. And then Max Scherzer was also scratched from his start on Tuesday due to neck spasms. And he said he hopes to start this weekend against the Nationals. But between the neck the neck spasms and yesterday's report about the shoulder, it's pretty scary stuff right now with Max Scherzer. There was an article released last week that we didn't really talk about, but it was released on The Athletic, and it was authored by Will Salmon, Brittany Garoli, and Eno Saris. Revealed some fear in the baseball industry about this injury reckoning that's coming due to the pitch clock. And this April, just revealing some of the stats that they had in this article, this April was tied for the highest number of pitchers on the IL since at least 2000, and the greatest number of starting pitchers over that period. And it's not proven to be because of the pitch clock, but it is a possibility, and it's something that I think we have to keep in mind. It's just, this is why we're seeing, I think, so much bad pitching right now. Is not only are good pitchers struggling, but we have what are supposed to be good pitchers out injured, and then their backups are coming in, and those guys are getting rocked because obviously they're not very good pitchers either. So just kind of wanted to throw all that out there. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on Fried, Scherzer, or everything else I just revealed.
Well, I will point out that while the effects of there could be effects of the pitching clock like that are going to take some time to become evident. Right now, it's a lot of theorizing, and of course, correlation doesn't imply causation and all of that. For what it's worth, MLB's own studies, because the pitch clock's been in existence, it was an even shorter pitch clock in the minors for the past few years, and they said it didn't lead to an increase of injuries. I don't know. I haven't had a look under the hood at those studies that they did, but that's what they said. That is part of how they sold the pitch clock. I will say there are a number of pitchers, we've mostly focused on the bad starts from Tuesday, but there were a number of pitchers who had been struggling, who had very good starts. And I feel like there has been a lot of May is the month of the pitcher's revenge happening here, because we haven't gotten to him yet, but Lucas Giolito had an incredible start, and his velocity was way up. Velocities for a lot of pitchers have been up in May. I don't. Yeah. We talked about that recently, Frank, and maybe it has to do with the temperatures warming up. And but Lucas Giolito, his last two starts, 18 swinging strikes in each of them. His velocity in this most recent start Tuesday, even better than 2 years ago. So sort of like I was saying about Tony Gonsolin from Monday, this was kind of Lucas Giolito's, he's back start. Lucas Giolito, he has my trust again. I feel like he's the guy who we knew prior to 2022. And you can feel really satisfied with that. And so there have been instances like that where it seems like on the whole, the pitching situation is improving. Maybe that's just my perception. Well, it could only go up based on how bad it was early on. But I do get the impression that on the whole, it's improving.
I think the key takeaway is just 1 month is not going to be enough of a sample size for us to know one way or the other at a population level, let alone how it's going to end. I've seen a lot of Alek Manoah is struggling because of the pitch clock. Maybe that's a perfectly reasonable explanation, but it's also we don't really know. He is struggling and there is a pitch clock, but like Scott said, causation does not always equal correlation. And
Did I say it backwards?
No, I think you said it right. Did I say it backwards?
I think you said it backwards, Chris.
Correlation does not equal causation.
Correct.
or necessarily equal causation. Yeah, that's the one. And that's one of those smart guy things that like I'm just like faking my way through being smart, and every once in a while it shows up.
Hanlon's razor.
But yeah, it's
That's not Hanlon's razor. Sorry.
We are having a great podcast.
It's one of those things where it's like there are anecdotal evidence to suggest one way or the other on all of these things we're talking about, that pitching is better in May than it was in April, or that velocity, but like someone can and maybe should sit down and like actually do the research on this. But I still think like we probably don't want to make any population-wide pronouncements right now. I think it's just too early just in general, and then like we're slicing the too early into even smaller too earlys. And so I just want to keep steady, not try to swing back and forth between pitching's good now. And,
Oh yeah. No, I wasn't saying that. I'm just saying like, we aren't actually going to wind up in a scenario where everybody has a 4.50 ERA.
Yeah. Hey, it's a very welcome sight. We'll take some good pitching performances when we can get them. Let's take our first break. When we return, we'll get into Francisco Alvarez, who hit 2 home runs in a game on Tuesday. We'll do that right after this.
Come and get it.
So much new Beavis.
So when are you going to put those needles in? Ow, my back.
So much new Butthead.
Yeah, baby. Parenthood is cool.
I now pronounce you husband and husband.
This is the happiest day of my life.
So many all new reasons.
Hail, dim-witted earthling.
To stay on the couch.
Let the games begin.
An all new season of Beavis and Butthead now streaming exclusively on Paramount Plus. Use promo code Nachos for 1 month free.
Welcome back. And just a reminder to download and follow our 5-minute podcast, Fantasy Baseball Today in 5, wherever you listen to podcasts. We usually grab the biggest news items, the biggest standouts, and we talk about them in just 5 minutes. So if you want an abbreviated version of the podcast, you can follow there. And if you're watching on YouTube, we have a QR code in the top right corner. You can scan that, and that'll take you right to the podcast. Let's get into a few rookie hitting standouts here. Francisco Alvarez went 2 for 4 with a double dong and has started 5 of the last 6 games for the Mets, which is encouraging. And over his last 14 games, he's batting .308 with 3 home runs, a 24% strikeout rate. The average exit velocity and launch angle are still lacking during that time, but the overall numbers are coming around. Scott, Francisco Alvarez, 48% roster. Do you think that number needs to be higher?
I moved him up to 15th in my rest of season catcher rankings, and there's a lot of room for debate, I would say, from 11 on. Francisco Alvarez has among the most upside of that group. I think the biggest thing for him is just that he's playing so much more regularly now. Started, this was
5 of 6,
8 of 11 in May. So he's their primary catcher now, and that's a good thing for his fantasy value, of course. Hopefully this 2-homer game is the beginning of a hot streak, because we know there's a lot of upside there.
I think the key thing to keep an eye on over the next few days is whether he finally gets a start at DH. I don't think he has one.
Not yet
this season. And then the thing they said when they called him up was, we're not going to use him as a DH, which was what everybody thought they were going to do. But he could hit his way into that role. And so that'll be the question, is like, does the 2-homer day lead to a DH opportunity? I think that's where you would start to see like his value potentially really take off.
So to put that in perspective, Scott mentioned he moved Alvarez up to 15th in his catcher rankings. That's just ahead of Yasmani Grandal, Gabriel Moreno, Shea Langoliers, Elias Diaz, names like that. So if you play in a deeper 1-catcher league and you're looking to make the swap, those are a few names that you can pick up Alvarez over. Miguel Vargas went 1 for 4 with a walk and his 3rd home run. And in May, he's hitting .241, but he is hitting some extra base hits. 2 homers, 2 doubles, 1 triple, a stolen base. Overall this season, the plate discipline has been as advertised. Very good. 20 walks to 25 strikeouts. He is 77% rostered. Chris, do you think that number should be closer to 100%? Miguel Vargas is the name we're talking about.
100% is tough, just because I don't know how much of a contributor he's ultimately going to be in home runs or stolen bases. And so it's, he might be more heavily tilted towards the head-to-head side of things than the roto, which is more or less what we expected. The underlying numbers suggest that there's a little bit of room for improvement on what he's done so far. So I will say, 77% is probably not, it's certainly not too high. So I think there are probably some roto leagues where you could go ahead and add him.
Do we do anything with this? Jordan Diaz went 3 for 4 with a triple dong against the Yankees here. He started 3 straight for the Oakland A's. He didn't start any of the 5 games before that. Scott, does this matter at all? Jordan Diaz for 3.
I mean, a 22-year-old with a 3-homer game who's eligible at second base and third base too, right? I'm not going to say it doesn't matter. He hit 326 with 19 home runs and an 882 OPS between double and triple A last year. And like I said, it's only 22. I'm not rushing to pick him up everywhere, but I'm definitely going to keep an eye on this, see if he can spin it into more, because he was a good hitter in the minors.
Yeah. And hey, the Oakland A's don't have anything to lose. Why not, play the kids and see what he could do? So very impressive performance for him. Let's see if Jordan Diaz can build off of that. A few other waiver wire hitters in shallower leagues. Lars Nootbaar went 1 for 4 with a walk and his 3rd home run. And he crushed that home run, by the way, 431 feet, 108.2 exit velocity. And he's coming around over his last 7 games, batting .393 with 1 homer and 2 steals. I like to see the speed. That's, I wasn't really expecting much from Nootbaar, but yeah, he's running a little bit. 74% roster for him. And Ahmed Rosario went 4 for 4 with a triple and an RBI. He needed it because he's batting just .242. The strikeouts are up this season. Still hitting the ball very hard this year and still very fast. 72% rostered is Ahmed Rosario. Chris, what about those 2 names? Same question as Miguel Vargas. Do you think they are must roster in every league, Nootbaar and Rosario?
Again, no, I don't think every single league that it's tough, because I do think Nootbaar especially has that kind of upside.
Yeah, I'm gonna say Nootbaar is.
Sure. Yeah. He's another player who, like, it's always tough when the player might be better for a points league where the shallower rosters hold them back. But yeah, I'm fine saying he should be 100% rostered. Rosario, I don't know. I'm just not much of a believer in him. He always has interesting skills, and he never seems to quite put them together at the same time. Last year was the closest we've gotten, and even then was, still pretty mediocre overall. So I don't think he's a must roster player.
It would be hard. It would be hard to roster Rosario in a league that doesn't have the third middle infield spot.
Yeah,
use the traditional roto lineup.
His skill set, contrary to Vargas and Nootbaar, his skill set is more palatable in a roto league than a points league. So, there is room for him as a middle infielder, sure.
But I was saying I wrote about Nootbaar in the last edition of Waiver Wire because I was surprised how much his roster rate had fallen, considering, he was one of the trendiest outfield picks on draft day. And he's basically done everything we asked him to do. He missed those 2 weeks with a jammed thumb, but since coming back, he's reached base at about a 400 clip. He's patted leadoff for the Cardinals. There isn't huge home run and stolen base totals there, but there's enough. There, like I think if you approach Nootbaar like a Brandon Nimmo type or Christian Yelich type, or maybe even the best of both, that's how you should value him. So he's a top 30 outfielder for me, and that makes him. And he specializes in points leagues, which tend to be the shallower rosters.
Yeah, he's hitting 288 with basically an 18 homer, 24 steal pace. Like that, you would take that every time from him.
Yeah,
and almost as many walks as strikeouts. So again, lending itself to the points league format. But the launch angle has been weird for Nootbaar this year. Lots of ground balls. I noticed a few of those hard hits on Tuesday. They were higher, launch angles. So hopefully that's something that can that Nootbaar can get going. A few outfielders, Scott, how would you rank this group? Harrison Bader, he's just like off and running since he returned. Well, not literally, he's often hitting, I guess. He went 3 for 4 on Tuesday, 11 hits in 7 games since returning. He also has 8 RBI and 5 runs scored. Jorge Soler, a double dong, a massive double dong. I mean, we're talking the first home run he hit, 112.5 exit velocity, 468 feet. Then the next one was 433 feet. I mean, he's still crushing the ball. He's like 94th percentile in barrel rate. That was entering Tuesday. Jurickson Profar went 2 for 4 with a double dong. He's batting just 220 early on. And TJ Friedl went 2 for 4 with a triple, 2 runs, 2 RBI, and his 4th steal. He's quietly having a very productive season. He's batting 325 as well. He's got a little power and speed. Scott, how would you rank that group? Bader, Soler, Profar, and Friedl.
I mean, clearly Soler's the most attractive. He has these games occasionally where he reminds us just how much of a masher he is. And like, I've had a hard time getting fully behind him. So he's up to 9 home runs now. His batting average climbed over 230. It seems like he could hit for a better average than that. You look at his StatCast page and it's all lit up in red, but that's always true for Jorge Soler. That's the thing. Like, okay, 91st percentile average exit velocity, 96th percentile max exit velocity. Every year, he's like 93rd to 98th percentile in those categories, and rarely has it translated to big production. So it's a bit Pollyannish of me, I guess, to just say, oh, look at his StatCast page. Of course, this is who he is. But there have been times in the past, the 48 homer 2019, that stretch with the Braves in 2021 after coming over from the Royals, where he was a must-start fantasy player. And he could be that again. I don't know what was like. I look at the profile in previous years where he wasn't good, and I don't really know what was lacking. Like there's just that hole in player evaluation that I don't know how to fill. That explains why Jorge Soler was such an underachiever. But there's a chance that this year is different. And I would say, even in 3 outfielder leagues, it's not a bad idea to make a play for him. So he would clearly be number 1 here, and a distant number 1. To rank the others quickly, I think I'd go Profar, Jurickson Profar 2, even though the numbers are bad so far. Just he's the Rockies' leadoff hitter, and so hopefully that'll change. And then I will go TJ Friedl 3. I'll go Harrison Bader 3, even though I don't really like him. Then TJ Friedl 4 and Taylor Walls 5. Don't really know how Taylor Walls has done what he's done so far. The underlying numbers are pretty unimpressive, and he doesn't play all that consistently either.
Scotty jumping ahead in the rundown. I didn't even mention Taylor Walls.
I thought you mentioned Walls. Sorry.
Not yet. He doesn't have outfield eligibility, but I was going to pair these next two together. They're kind of versatile players. It's Taylor Walls, who hit his 6th home run, and he's batting .265. He's got 6 homers. He's got 6 steals, a .907 OPS. And Christopher Morel, his first game back in the lineup. We spoke about him on yesterday's podcast. 2 for 4 with a sock and a shoe and a strikeout. It's like the entire Christopher Morel experience in one game. And 422 feet was the home run. It's, the guy's got legit power. Chris, if you're looking for like one of these more like versatile type guys that you can move around, who would you rather have, Taylor Walls or Christopher Morel?
Morel. Pretty easily. I mean, it's possible that he ends up running into the same playing time issues that Taylor Walls has and just will likely continue to have because it's the Rays. Basically, everybody except Rosarena and Wander Franco has those issues. He's been really good. The underlying numbers in large parts back it up. Christopher Morel, I find him really interesting. It's kind of like the Cubs let Javier Baez walk and then just kind of replaced him with another like sub peak Javier Baez, to be clear, not the guy who almost won MVP, but like Morel's going to hit the ball hard. He's super athletic and he's going to strike out a lot. And it's just a question of whether that strikeout rate will be palatable enough for him to hit 245. If he does, I think he's going to be a pretty good fantasy option. We had 16 homers and 10 steals in 113 games last year. I at least in the short term, I have some playing time concerns for him, but if he plays up to his potential, there's a much easier path for him to everyday playing time than there is for Walls, I think.
Yeah, I wonder what happens when Nico Horner is healthy, right? Because he's dealing with the hamstring right now. But, between middle infield and outfield, I think they could find a way to get Christopher Morel in their lineup. So I like the call out to Javier Baez, who, like, Morel is super animated, too, on the field. Like, he hit that home run. He was, like, screaming. He's fired up around the bases. Like, he definitely has that same quality that Javier Baez had when he was in Chicago as well. A deeper league name to watch here. I always love this guy. I have him in the Scott White Dynasty League. It's like you always find yourself rooting for players you have in Dynasty. Jesus Sanchez went 2 for 4 with 2 doubles. That's back-to-back games with 2 doubles. And over his last 15 games, he's batting .357 with 2 homers and 1 steal, which frankly even surprised me. So he's just a name to watch for now. And he's starting to play more, and maybe he can, go somewhere with it. Some news and notes, great news, as the MRI on Mason Miller's right elbow came back clean. He's expected to try a side session on Friday, and the belief is that he'll avoid the IL. I don't know how much I buy all of it, but
that just seems unnecessarily risky, right? Like, this guy's never been healthy. He throws 102 miles an hour or whatever. Just give him 2 weeks off.
Yeah. But
just
clearly
give Mason Miller 2 weeks off and go try to finish off your stadium deal. Like, focus on what you really care about, Oakland.
Clearly, I overreacted yesterday by saying you could go ahead and drop Mason Miller, because now they're talking about him not going on the IL. I still think he'll go on the IL, but
probably
it's not nearly as serious of an injury as they were making it sound like yesterday.
It's great news because he's looked electric so far. So obviously we'd love to have him in the game. Jacob deGrom could be another 2 to 3 weeks away from his return. He's been limited to playing light catch. This report was kind of weird. There was one earlier on before this that said he's only been playing light catch and he's not really close. So I don't know, where
Given that it's Jacob deGrom, I'm going to assume he's throwing 95 in light catch.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I'm not really buying the 2 to 3 weeks return for deGrom, but we'll see. Luis Severino will begin a rehab assignment at AAA on Wednesday. Carlos Rodon was given a cortisone injection and could throw off the mound as soon as this weekend. He's apparently battling a chronic back issue now. Kyle Schwarber left Tuesday with a left foot contusion. X-rays were negative. Starling Marte has been dropped to 6th in the Mets order as he's batting just .213 on the season. That definitely went up because I saw he had 2 hits, but he's been struggling. Tyler O'Neill could begin a rehab assignment next week. He's on the IL with a lower back strain. Nick Lodolo's next start has been pushed back from Thursday to Saturday due to left calf soreness. And I just kind of wonder if maybe that's something he's been pitching through and it explains some of the, poor performance, but
that is, as the kids say, cope.
I'm trying here. Lance McCullers threw a 25-pitch bullpen session on Tuesday. He reportedly hit 91.6 miles per hour during the session. Last year, he averaged 93 miles per hour with his single.
Weirdly specific bullpen session velocity reading there.
Hey,
it's usually like, he hit 91.6 miles per hour.
Exactly 91.6. Andres Munoz underwent a PRP shot in his shoulder last week and won't be ready to go on a rehab assignment until the end of the month. Noah Syndergaard left his start with a cut on his finger. David Roberts said they'll see how Syndergaard's finger responds. Mauricio Dubon left Tuesday's game with left hamstring discomfort. There's a good chance Yoel Moncada could be back this weekend. Ranger Suarez is set to make his debut this weekend in Colorado. He was okay last year, but I just don't think he's going to work out very well in this new environment, but I could be wrong. Josh Donaldson will go through another week of intense baseball activities before starting a rehab assignment. Ramon Arias was placed in the IL with a strained left hamstring, and I wonder if this could lead to one of those Orioles prospects getting the call in his absence. I think I saw Ryan O'Hearn was recalled in the meantime, but who knows?
Come on. Got Jordan Westberg tearing it up. You got Colton Cowser tearing it up. You're one of the best teams in the AL. Play like it.
Yeah. Let's go. Let's they called up
Act
Joey
like
Ortiz
it. That's a
recently,
better verb. Act like it.
Lots of fun names coming for Baltimore. Oswald Peraza was placed on the IL with a right ankle sprain retroactive to May 6th. James Paxton will make his Red Sox debut this Friday against the Cardinals. He has not pitched in a major league game since 2021. So, yes, highly anticipated for him. And some prospect notes. Reds top prospect, Ellie De La Cruz.
That's just nuts.
This is crazy stuff. Just literally breaking StatCast. had 3 batted balls of at least 116 miles per hour on Tuesday night. No team in the StatCast era has ever done that in one game, let alone one player within that game. So this kid is ridiculous. There are, swinging issues with him, but big power, lots of speed. I think we'll see him at some point this season. I don't know how soon, but
I've said with Ellie De La Cruz, because he's another very tall shortstop, that he seems like a derivative of O'Neal Cruz, right down to his name, De La Cruz of the Cruz.
yes, yeah. No, I think it's a really good call.
For what it's worth, he was really bad to start the season. Struck out like 42% of the time in the month of April. I think he had a hamstring injury that he was recovering from spring training, but he's been awesome since the start of May, which is only 6-7 games now, but he's got 7 strikeouts and 44 plate appearances in that time, 3 straight games with a home run, including 4 in that stretch. So seems to be figuring it out. I think we see him this summer at some point.
I would love for the Reds to do this. I know they won't, but it would just be awesome if they call up everybody at the same time, right? Like Ellie De La Cruz, Christian Encarnacion Strand, and Matt McLean. Just call them all up, let them all play, and let's see what happens. But it's not going to happen. Giants prospect Casey Schmidt was promoted and was batting 7th on Tuesday. This season in the minors, he was batting .313 with 10 doubles, a home run, and a .762 OPS. Actually hit a home run in his very first game here on Tuesday night. Scott, anything to see here with Casey Schmidt?
I mean, there's always a question. The Giants are sort of like the Rays. How much is he going to end up playing? He is not among the highest in prospects, but he has some power. Let's see how much he plays. Reminds me a little of David VR in terms of the fantasy impact he could make.
Yeah.
By the way, Frank, you left one out.
What did I leave out?
Andrew Abbott and his 60 strikeouts in 6 starts.
Yeah,
let's call him up at the same time too.
Get him up. Let's get all these Reds prospects up. It's they definitely have some fun names coming as well. Let's take our final break, and when we return, we'll get into a few pitching performances here on Fantasy Baseball Today.
Absolutely magisterial here.
Welcome back, and a big thank you to everyone watching us live. 600 people here going strong, well after 1 a.m. Eastern time. So if you're here watching us live, please hit that like button. We really do appreciate it. Some waiver wire pitchers. We already talked about Louie Varland. How would we rank the rest of this group? Michael Wacha turned in a quality start on the other side of that game at the Twins. 6 innings, 1 run, 4 strikeouts for him. Lots of inconsistencies, but back-to-back quality starts there. Clark Schmidt turned in his first quality start of the season. He was going up against the Oakland A's. 6 innings, 2 runs, 7 strikeouts. And over his last 4 starts, he has a 3.00 ERA and a 143 whip, well over a strikeout per inning. And there was a little sleeper appeal coming into the season. It feels like maybe he's turning it around. And Michael Lorenzen posted back-to-back quality starts. He was at the Guardians, 7 innings, 1 run, 3 strikeouts for him. Did have 13 swinging strikes on 98 pitches. Chris, how would you rank this group? I'll throw Varland in there too. I'm pretty sure he's at the top though. Varland, Wacha, Schmidt, and Lorenzen.
I think it's Varland, Gap, Schmidt, Gap, Wacha, Gap, Lorenzen, Gap.
Oh,
Lorenzen, pretty low end. Wacha, I'm gonna redo my rankings hopefully this week, and he might be inside the top 100, but that's damning with faint praise. So, yeah, Varland and Schmidt are the most interesting, mostly just because they're not proven to be mediocre.
All right, fair enough. Let's get into a few other high-end performances here on Tuesday. And I've been telling people to sell high on Shane Bieber. Was that a mistake? I don't know. I'll ask you guys about it. Season high, 9 strikeouts up against the Tigers. He went 6 shutout in this one, 7 hits, 1 walk. Season high, 19 swinging strikes on 101 pitches. Still did allow a lot of hard contact, 91.6 average exit velocity against. And it's 2 starts in a row now where the slider was Bieber's most used pitch. He's got a 2.61 ERA, a 1.10 whip, but well below a strikeout per inning. And again, he's allowing the most hard contact of his career. His expected ERA entering the start was 4.86. Scott, Did I make a mistake telling people to sell high?
Well, if you made a mistake, then so did I, because my article 7 sell high pitchers just dropped Tuesday morning, and then Shane Bieber turned in this start Tuesday night. And what made him such an attractive sell high candidate is that the ERA and WHIP had been Shane Bieber like, but his strikeout rate was coming into the start was his K per 9 was 5.9 K per 9 in an environment where contact is being punished, maybe worse than ever before. And just get the profile of Shane Bieber, right? He had that big velocity drop last year and managed to overcome it because his slider and curveball both played up like crazy. That seemed like, kind of a tightrope walk, and they weren't playing up the same way. The whiffs were clearly down. It seemed like a good time to shop him because he's still the casual player would still perceive him as an ace, and but there were a lot of underlining warning signs. So I was with you on that. But again, like I was saying for Alek Manoah earlier, what makes it so hard to predict future performance in baseball is that a lot of times it can take a very small adjustment to click it all back into place. I don't know that for sure that happened with Shane Bieber, but given his history, it certainly seems plausible it could. I would still call him a sell high candidate, even after this start. It'll be even easier to sell high on him now. But as always, the key is that you're selling high. You are taking an asset that appears to have peaked and you're selling it at its peak. So you should get a peak return. Otherwise, it's not worth doing.
Yeah, you should still value him in trades as, at least in my eyes, no worse than a high-end number 2 starting pitcher. That's not to say I think he will be a high-end number 2 starting pitcher, although I think that's certainly more likely than that he falls outside of the top 40. I don't love that he's like throwing his cutter more. That's not actually been a great pitch. And when he's been at his best, it's not really been with the cutter being a big part of his repertoire. So I don't know if he just hasn't had the feel for his curveball, which is down to a 10% usage, which is the lowest of his career. And even in this start, it was only 10%. But this is one where, like, yes, the underlying numbers suggest he hasn't been as good as sorry, I kicked something accidentally, as he's actually performed. But the track record makes me believe he'll figure out the deficiencies.
Would you guys flip Shane Bieber for Sandy Alcantara if you could?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree. I would do that as well. I had someone yelling at me on Twitter today. Oh, you told me to sell high on Shane Bieber. Yeah, I did. Sell high. That, again, we always stress the sell high. I'm not telling you to just sell Shane Bieber for anything. It's like, if you can get appropriate value for him, then you shouldn't be mad
now,
at still pitching well. Like,
here's an interesting one: Shane Bieber or Framber Valdez.
Well,
I'm taking Valdez.
Framber Valdez is up next, and
that's why I did it. That's what we call a transition, folks.
That one,
they'll teach that one.
I wanted to say more about
class.
selling high. I'm not ready to transition yet.
That's a lot closer. I think I would take Valdez, but
I would definitely take Valdez. Let's talk about Valdez.
Sell high.
Is this the best version of Framber Valdez that we have seen? He's starting a new quality start streak. He's now up to 7 straight quality starts, 8 innings of 1-run ball, 12 strikeouts, 0 walks at the Angels, 18 swinging strikes on 99 pitches, 9 of those on the cutter, 5 on the curve, 3 on the changeup, seemingly everything working in this start, and changed the pitch mix up. He tripled his cutter usage in this start out of nowhere. Used it 32% of the time. It was 11% entering the start. And his velocity continues to rise 3 years in a row. So back in 2021, 92.5 miles per hour. Last year it was 93.9. This year it's up to 95.2 on that sinker, which looks like a phenomenal pitch. And the control, 1.7 walks per 9. Now, I'm skeptical that will remain the case for Framber Valdez, but throwing harder and getting whiffs on all these different kind of pitches, I kind of lean towards, yes, this is the best version of Framber Valdez that we've seen.
He's kind of the comp for him has always been Dallas Keuchel. it's been kind of a lazy comp, lefty ground ball pitcher for the Houston Astros, but like he's also kind of following that path now. Like, is this his 2015 Dallas Keuchel season? It was a different type of pitcher. Dallas Keuchel didn't get as many strikeouts as we're seeing, but that was also an outlier season for Dallas Keuchel in terms of his strikeout rate. He was an above average strikeout pitcher that year. You know, it could be one of those scenarios where like he's just putting it all together. Framber Valdez looked amazing tonight. He looked so good. He was getting whiffs with 3 different pitches. The cutter has been an outstanding swing and miss pitch for him so far. 39% whiff rate entering tonight. I don't see a lot of reasons to be skeptical.
Well, there already weren't. What I look at with this performance from Valdez is, oh my gosh, he may have another level in him to unlock with this cutter, because his cutter was his best swing and miss pitch. He was only throwing it 11% of the time prior to this start, which is, not very much at all. It was the most thrown pitch in this start, and it was still, they still couldn't hit it. Yeah, I was responsible for half the whiffs. So like Framber Valdez had, I'm not going to say he had only one trick, but like the thing that made him so good was this outlier ground ball rate. He was still a good strikeout pitcher for an extreme ground ball pitcher, but he wasn't a huge bat misser. If he becomes like a genuine strikeout pitcher on top of it, then, in addition to working deep into games consistently, I mean, we might be talking about Framber Valdez as a legit ace at that point. And I have more confidence in saying that with him than I do Shane Bieber.
All right. And they're getting Jose Altuve back soon. So some run support too. That can, only help Framber Valdez moving forward. A few other pitching performances I wanted to mention. This first group, Grayson Rodriguez. Remember last week, Scott, I said, there's no way you could start Grayson Rodriguez against Tampa Bay. And then you were like, he's probably going to have his best start. Look at what he did. Not that it was it
wasn't that great of a start.
But it was the furthest he went into any start in his career. 5 2/3, 2 runs allowed, 4 strikeouts up against Tampa Bay. So pretty impressive stuff there for Grayson Rodriguez. Aaron Nola turns in a quality start up against the Blue Jays. 6 innings, 2 runs, 6 strikeouts for him. Charlie Morton, similar kind of performance up against the Red Sox. 6 innings, 2 runs, 7 strikeouts. And the name we mentioned earlier, apologies, Giolito. Should have got to you earlier, but awesome start at the Royals. 6 innings, 2 runs, 9 strikeouts, 18 swinging strikes, and the velocity up across the board. He averaged 94.3 miles per hour on that fastball, which is actually a little bit higher than where he was pitching in his prime.
I already got into all this, Frank. We did get into Lucas Giolito earlier.
A little bit, yeah. Anything else you'd like to add on those names, Scott? Charlie Morton, Nola, and Grayson Rodriguez?
Are you grading Grayson Rodriguez on a curve here? Because he had less than a strikeout per inning. He had a whip over 1.5 in this start. His swinging strike rate was below 10%. It wasn't that great of a start.
It was a solid start for a top pitching prospect. Like, I feel like we haven't had many of those. So
very tough matchup.
So you are grading him on a curve.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not ready to get Grayson Rodriguez in my lineup or anything.
All right. Well, this next group includes Shohei Ohtani, who turned in his 5th quality start of the season, 7 innings, 3 runs, 7 strikeouts. And since I told everybody to use Ohtani as a pitcher, 2 weeks ago, he's been a little underwhelming as a pitcher.
He's had
not strikeouts wise, but the ratios.
He's kind of had 2 bad innings, I think. Like he had the really bad 4th inning in his last start. I think tonight was the 5th inning where he gave up. It was either 5 straight hits or 5 straight base runners. And also, Houston's not a great offense, but it's still a relatively tough, contact-oriented lineup. So he's awesome.
Yeah.
Second in the majors in strikeouts.
Yeah. I think I heard during the broadcast that he passed Babe Ruth in terms of pitcher strikeouts in his career. Whatever. He's obviously going to get much further past that as well. George Kirby tied a career high with 9 strikeouts up against the Rangers. He went 7 shutout. Of course, 0 walks. He only has, 3 walks allowed in 7 starts this season. This was the best that I've seen the slider look as well. So maybe Kirby can use that to get more whiffs moving forward. Logan Webb turned in his 4th straight quality start up against the Nationals, 7 innings, 1 run, 7 strikeouts. Chris, anything else on this group? Ohtani, Kirby, and Logan Webb.
I'm glad to see that things have turned around for Logan Webb, because he had that weird start to the season where I think it was his first 4 starts. He gave up 4 earned runs in each, but he was getting a bunch of strikeouts. I don't know. I remain really intrigued by him. I think he's like sort of a poor man's Framber Valdez, but there are some signs that he's like making a little bit of a leap similarly to Framber Valdez and getting more strikeouts this season. So I think Logan Webb is very good and still has room to be great.
A few hitting leftovers. Wander Franco went 2 for 4 with a sock and a shoe. His 7th home run, his 9th steal of the season. While we're talking about the Rays, I just find it interesting. I know they're just so loaded with talent right now. They can't find a way to get Josh Lowe in the lineup. He has sat 2 of the past 3 games, and all 3 of those have been against righties. Just kind of interesting. And I don't really understand it, but
that's the knock on Lowe.
It's a knock on the Rays, right? Playing for the Tampa Bay Rays. Bo Bichette went 2 for 5 with his 8th home run of the season. Nick Castellanos completely proving me wrong. I mean, he has bounced back like nothing happened last year. 3 for 4 with his 5th home run, his 14th double of the season. So tons of doubles. He's been great in every format, but even better in points leagues.
It's interesting the way Bo Bichette and Nick Castellanos have taken off this year, because they've done it sort of doing the opposite thing from each other. Bo Bichette has been much more opposite field oriented this year, and Nick Castellanos has been much more pole oriented this year, which I mean, that's not universally a good or bad thing. I think it just depends on how hard you impact the ball. Spreading it out more is probably a good thing if you impact the ball as hard as Bo Bichette does, and pulling it more is probably a good thing if you don't.
And in Castellanos' case, he's always been someone who underperformed his expected stats for the most part, in part because he played in a terrible home park, and in part because he hit so many balls to straightaway and to the power alleys where, if you hit a ball 380 feet down the left field line, it's definitely a home run. If you hit it 380 feet to right center, it might just be an out. So if he does sustain that's, I think in his case, a pretty good change.
Gleyber Torres is trying to get going again, back-to-back games with a home run. He has 3 straight multi-hit games, and he got off to that amazing start, and then he was ice cold, and looks like he's coming around again. Big game for Dansby Swanson, who had 3 hits, 2 doubles, and his 3rd home run. Juan Soto, 4 for 4 with a walk, 4 hard hit balls, 3 of them over 108 miles per hour. Sean Murphy, another great game, 3 for 4 with a double and 4 RBI. He had a batted ball, 110.5 off the bat. A few bullpen updates for the Guardians. Emmanuel Clase allowed a hit, but picked up his 13th save. For the Orioles, Felix Bautista recorded the final 4 outs. He did walk 3, but picked up his 8th save. And whenever this guy pitches and he does something good, I'm going to continue to mention it. Yennier Cano, he recorded another 5 outs with 2 strikeouts and his 6th hold. He has yet to allow an earned run this season. For the Cardinals, Ryan Helsley was unavailable. Giovanni Gallegos picked up his 2nd save. For the Reds, Alexis Diaz recorded the final 4 outs for his 7th save. For the White Sox, Ronaldo Lopez pitched in the 8th inning with a 2-run lead. Kendall Graveman pitched in the 9th for his 1st save of the season.
And not that it matters too much because Liam Hendricks is presumably back soon, but that was a situation where I think the 2, 3, and 4 hitters were up against the White Sox. So that was why Lopez was in there.
If I can take you behind the curtain here, Chris, I honestly didn't even look it up for that exact reason. I'm like,
it doesn't matter that much.
For the Astros, Ryan Presley struck out 2 for his 5th save. And for the Giants, Camilo Doval also struck out 2 for his 8th save of the season. To stream or not to stream, your 2 or 3 favorites. And we'll start with Wednesday here. And who did we say yesterday, Scott? I think my preference was Edward Cabrera at the Diamondbacks, even though that's a tougher matchup. Right. But you preferred. I like Josiah Gray at the.
I like Josiah Gray at the Giants.
I like Seth Lugo at the Twins too. I think that's fine.
Yeah, those are all okay. I'm not dying to use any of them, but they're all okay.
I also mentioned in deeper leagues, Rich Hill against the Rockies and Peyton Battenfield up against the Tigers. On Thursday, tougher matchup, but Bailey Ober is pitching well, going up against the Padres. I'm good with that one.
Yeah, definitely.
Not much else here. Maybe Domingo Germán against Tampa Bay, but this is his second start in a row against Tampa, and I typically don't like using like questionable pitchers against the same offense 2 times in a row. So
yeah, I'm okay skipping that one.
Yeah, so not really much else going on Thursday. I think Bailey Ober is probably your best bet. We're going to wrap there. For Scott and Chris, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. We'll be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.